morning, everyone. This is a new episode of Carolyn Talks, and this is the podcast and YouTube channel where I speak to film creatives about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I am joined by my guest, writer and director Edson Oda, who has directed a film that honestly made me cry the two times that I saw it. I first saw it at the premiere at Sundance 2020, which was a long time ago. And but before we get into the film, I'm just gonna ask Edson to speak a bit about himself and about the film, and then we'll just get into all the fun stuff about it. So, Edson.
Okay, yeah. Let me see what I can say about myself. My name is Edson Oda. I'm from Brazil, Japanese descent. Moved to US like 2012. Just released this movie called 9 Days, and it's in theaters now. Yeah.
Yay. So this film is kind of like a surrealistic, I think, high concept film to me anyway, because
Uh-huh.
I love the way how you are discussing life and death and even like the concept of the in between, or some people would call it purgatory. But
Uh-huh.
I don't think it's necessarily purgatory because it isn't that the people have died and that they're stuck there. I think it's the before, it's the
Hmm.
before birth, it's before conception. And so I wanted to ask you the first question is about the conception of 9 days, because I think this is a very interesting way to discuss what like the meaning of life, as we would say.
Yeah. You want me to talk more about the concept itself, or how I created this word?
Yes, how you came up with the concept of the film and the
Yeah.
fact that it is a concept within itself.
Yeah, there's so many movies about like the afterlife, right? And it's interesting because somehow I think I'm obsessed about death as well. It's something that I think all of us need to face, but it's kind of we don't want to. And there's something about I really love those movies about like after life, for example, Defend Your Life, or even After Life in Koreeda, and all those movies. And I never seen anything like about the before life. Now you have Soul, yeah, but at the time we didn't have anything like before life. So I thought it would be also a good opportunity in the sense of because when afterlife is so much about the goal, the destination, and I think before life is something about you seeing yourself as like a winner, of this race. Like, okay, there's something before, and you're here for some kind of reason, or you won some kind of competition, whatever. But you're here, and now you have the chance to enjoy or something. So I think it came from that place, and yeah, that's pretty much like where it's coming from.
Yeah, I saw some of your short films that you created because 90s
Uh-huh.
is your first feature film, and I did pick up on like your it seems that you're fascinated with the concept of time and death and people trying to find their like trying to beat time or figure out like how much time they have to accomplish things.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of find that interesting and it's interwoven throughout this film, but I think with each character it's very different.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to speak to it with regards, especially I think with Kyo, played by Benedict Wong, and Will, in particular, played by Winston Duke. Like,
Uh-huh.
fantastic casting all around. Like, I don't know how you swung this cast, but I think you did a
Yeah.
fantastic job. You're your casting director. But I think to me, the two of them are like the antithesis of each other. Whereas Will he's just like counting down the days. For him,
Hmm.
time is 9 days. Everything just resets after 9 days. Whereas to me, it seems like Kyo is fascinated with observing Will and fascinated with observing times because he talks
Yeah.
about like he wonders about people in parallel universes watching each other,
Mhm.
which we as human beings we this is something that we wonder about. But I want to ask you about those two characters and like what is your inspiration for the two of them in particular and how you created their dialogue, because I think their dialogue is very interesting in that Kyo seems to he
Mhm.
gets frustrated with Will very easily. And you wouldn't think for the film that you're talking about that people would
Yeah.
get frustrated and angry, but they do.
Yeah, no, Will is based on uncle of mine who very artistic, very kind, very sensitive person. He was I barely met him, to be honest, and he when it was I was 12, he was 50 at the time, and then he committed suicide. He took his own life, and it was interesting because I remember seeing that distant figure as like this someone who wasn't strong enough to survive the war. And I think I felt like that through like so many years. And then after it was just like going through my struggles and having feeling more or less I think what he felt as well. That's when I started just like understanding what he went through. And then that's when I started like just wanting to know more about him and want to know more about our connection, because I see a lot of him inside me. And Probably a lot, that's inside me probably was inside him as well. So we somehow we got closer, through the process. And so we always kind of my uncle, it's me being afraid of becoming my uncle. Is like all this together, so it's kind of very almost like cathartic process. I was writing him, and I think Kyo there's so much about the perspective, right? While Will is so much about the blind spots. I think when there are moments in your life you're just like you can't see what's in front of you, you just see what's really cause you pain
Mhm.
or struggle. And I think it's hard for you to just observe anything else. And if you Kyo has a little bit more like broad, a view, and he's able to just see things and not just like blind spots, and but he has like I think a broader view than Will. And that's why he sometimes becomes almost like his consciousness, at times. So yeah, I think this comes from this dynamic of Will and Kill comes from that, I guess.
Yeah, with regards to what you said about like observing, like I find for Will, to me, I think each of these characters is so compelling, but for me Will is kind of like, when for any of us who've lost people in our lives, we always think like, did we miss, like what did we miss, like where was the clue?
Mm,
And for Will, it's fascinating because he has all of these multiple screens and he's watching like these dozens of people's and their lives from beginning. And he gets caught up, I think, in Amanda's death because he's like, for me, I saw is the fact that she was the one person that only ever remembered him after
yeah,
she was
yeah,
born.
yeah,
And I saw that as like, sometimes we like, if there's one person that we connect with throughout life and then we
yeah,
suddenly lose them,
yeah,
we're just trying to figure out, like, look at the little moments of where we connected with them, or where did something go wrong. Like, but because you're like saying he has all of this time watching them, but then it's like he can't see everything. We can't miss everything, and then
yeah,
even then we misinterpret things, or
yeah,
people are so good at like hiding pain, especially if people who have like depression or functional
yeah,
depressives.
yeah,
They're very good at hiding their pain, or
yeah,
even if they do let it out, like we miss the cues.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I wanted to ask you about the concept of the multiple screens, because I think it's fascinating that you have this one person who's watching all of these people. People would say it's like the God's eye, but I don't think it's a God's eye. I
hmm,
think it's just representative of just everyday people like me and you. Just like we have all of the people in our lives, and we're just like
yeah.
watching and observing them.
Yeah, no, that's so smart. I think the interpretation that you have, especially from saying that it's not Will's not, because some people feel like, oh, Will is God, but it's interesting. You say he's everything but God. He doesn't. He's powerless. It's interesting because God, you feel like he has power and control over things, and Will doesn't. So I think that makes him the most distant being from God in some sort of ways. But I think in the end, he sees it, what power he has. But yeah, it's interesting because the TV start the idea of the TVs was more like functional than anything else. It was like I just needed something to I need to create something that makes possible for Will to keep the connection with the people he sent. He's just like I thought like maybe they send a letter, or maybe they just like there's or maybe there's someone who films, and then that none of those things made sense because it felt like there's something that should be more like a you know visceral, or almost like spiritual in some sort of ways, but at the same time like not like out of blue. It have to follow some kind of rules. So it felt like, oh, it's interesting. We see, we have eyes. What if the person sees through their eyes, and then we can he can see what they're doing. So I think the TVs came from that necessity.
Hmm.
Uh,
No, I kind of love the concept of watching, because like we watch so much of life through
uh-huh,
TV.
uh-huh,
And I think like for me, like I relate a lot to things and to people outside of my world through TV. Like the TV is what allows us
yeah,
to be able to connect to people from around the world and learn about each other
uh-huh,
and learn about the
uh-huh,
world in a broader sense. So I think it perfectly encapsulates the story that you're telling, because
mhm,
you're like you mentioned, some people might look at it as spiritualism, but I to me I just saw it as we find ways to utilize whatever tools we have to connect with people.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think for Will in particular, I think he kind of does that. And I want to ask you about this because I think it's super fascinating how
Mhm.
I noticed it in your short films again too, where you people seem to be like you use people and different mediums to take stories literally outside of
Mhm.
one medium and present it into another form. Like I
Oh,
find
that's nice. Yeah, you noticed that. Yeah, it's something.
yeah, like you use like books or pictures or like pencils,
Yeah,
like things that
yeah,
are flat and just bring them up, and then you do it in
uh,
the film as well with like the
yeah.
beach scene made me cry
Uh,
tears.
yeah,
So I
that's
wanted to
it's.
ask you about your fascination with like basically I think projecting life from one medium into another.
No, I love exploring. I love playing with medias. You know, I feel like there's something in me that tells like that we haven't explored all the resources of cinema somehow. I think there will be in the same way that not that I'm doing that right now, but I think the same way that the person who the people who saw that if you cut from this to that
Yeah.
and that will make sense and people will will fill the gaps that those two images together combined they will complete the meaning of like okay, one person's there, another person's there, you cut over the shoulders and it makes sense. But life is not like that, but it makes sense when you and I think there's something about cinema which I love is just exploring stuff that uh, in the language that we can figure things out and show in a way that we haven't seen before. So I always trying to just explore and trying to find like new ways to tell a story and it's always like very it's a lot of fun when you're editing room and just like you combine things that basically they wouldn't make sense together, but when you see it, it's just like, oh yeah, this now it makes sense. So it's as you can see, like in most of my short films, they have some sort of a uh, they're like that. So yeah, I think that come from my curiosity and exploration.
Yeah, I just love the way how, like, especially because you have Will, Kyo, and Emma, and they're all looking at these creations that Will makes from auto literally from scratch. He makes these things from like it looks like the dump heaps or the it brought to mind how we say like one mass trash is another mass treasure. And he kind of does that where he gives these people who sadly don't get to be conceived, who never get a life
Yeah.
beyond these 9 days, a
Mhm.
chance to experience life. And the ones and like where he makes the beach, like I'm from Barbados, so I love the beach. So when I first saw
Uh-huh.
that in the cinema,
Uh-huh.
and I was
Uh-huh.
just like, that took me back home because I haven't been to a beach
Uh,
in years.
that's so interesting.
And that
Cool.
was amazing to see. And then there's the one where Maria's riding on the bicycle, and like
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the like building the production design for this film. I think it's super interesting because it's very minimalist, but
Hmm.
like the parts that you do that do come to life, I think are very impactful for the overall
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
and for the audiences. So can you speak a bit about your production design and like working with the crew and your set designer to come up
Yeah.
with
No,
concepts?
it was great. Like my production designer, his name is Dan Emerson, and it was just amazing how he elevated, the work and those scenes because the way I wrote it, it was more about um, the scenes and it is very minimal like the rest of the movie and I think what then brought to the scenes was more like, oh, I think this is the moment we just like can expand, even like the beach was just like a sand, almost like a sandbox or something, and then the person would just put their feet there and it would be more about their reaction, rather than the that becoming more than life experience. So I think like Dan and cinematographers that designs they just like they create an environment that is just like it's so big without being that big. It's not like but it feels really big like what they did because they they create this depth through like very simple objects, but it's just like it feels like huge somehow because the moment is huge. And yeah, and mostly we have the same idea of it. Was interesting because when we were exploring, we felt like, oh, it was always like they're saying like, yeah, probably it should be more polished. There's screens, they're a little, not perfect. And for me, no, 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 they need to be like that. Let's just like make it more amateur. Let's make it more. And at first they were like, ah, but this is not, even the scenes they record in the beach, they were not like 100% stable. They're more like, and they say they should be the POV of someone watching the beats, but they say, yeah, but it's not gonna look, but I think in the end, like that like roughness, that kind of amateur quality to it, it makes even, I think, more magical, because it's something that anyone could just like put those things together. It's almost like you look at a play that like I mean, like elementary school kids, they do in like why school, and it's so beautiful, it's so magical, because it comes from a very innocent, pure place. And I think that those last wishes had to have the same quality to it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because like think about it, like when kids are on a playground, they use whatever tools they have around them to create
Yep.
their own universes and their own
Hmm.
realities. And these beings like Maria and Emma and Cain, like they don't have any concept of life beyond these 9 days. So they're not looking for anything polished. They're not going to be looking
Yeah.
for like a mansion. Like this is
No, no,
for
yeah,
them
yeah,
beautiful, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
and I think that there's beauty in simplicity. I feel like I'm saying a whole bunch of cliches, but it's true. Um,
Yeah, the cliches are, are things that are so good that they became cliches, because it makes sense for everyone. So it's kind of, yeah, is it?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And like I think Emma and like going a bit up further back to the characters a bit because I think the characters kind of interact with their environment very interestingly. Like for
Hmm.
Emma and Kane, I think they're to me like just like how I see Kyo and Will as like two
Yeah.
sides of the same coin. I see Kane and Emma as the same
Yeah.
because Kane is very pessimistic. He when he watched these worlds and he watched these people's worlds, he saw
Hmm.
I don't think it's that he didn't see the good things, but I think he saw the reality of the world.
Hmm.
And Emma, she's like, I'm optimistic. I'm good. Why can't you see the good things? And they're like the line where Kane hits her, he's like, but why don't you see the bad things too?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think those characters are super interesting because
Yeah.
like we always say be optimistic, but then also I think also especially as people of color and like I'm an immigrant too,
Hmm.
where like the world isn't all sunshine and
Yeah.
roses. It's
Yeah.
not all rainbows and clouds, and
Yeah.
we have
Yeah.
to see the good, but we also have to be
Yeah.
acknowledge the bad. And I
Yeah.
think like
Yeah.
what Kane was trying to get her to do was in order to see the good, you also have to in order to appreciate the good, sorry, you have to recognize the bad, right? And for those two characters, just tell me a bit about working with the actors and the actresses that
Mhm.
you got for this film because I think everyone like was perfectly cast. Like I can't really
Yeah.
honestly
No,
see
they're
anyone
great.
else
Yeah.
in these
Yeah.
characters.
I think it started first. The souls, not just like Kane and Emma, not just Sassy and Bill, but we sat together and we just determined what would be the rules and what was the process of them becoming who they are. So it was interesting because we would start even for Kane or for Emma, it would be like they would kind of start the same, at the same place, but I think from what they see and the meaning they give to them is it starts getting different, and then start showing the personality. So I think what was evident about Kane was more like not that he was bad or good or anything pessimistic, but he was just mirroring what he was seeing in the TVs,
Mhm.
and I think from most of the TVs what he could see was just um, and also I think when we make choices in
Mhm.
what we watch,
Yeah.
it shows also our personality. So he was more drawn to that things of violence or things of competitiveness or those type of things. And I think, but for Kane, it was like he was mirroring what he was seeing. So
Mhm.
if most of these things in that word were more like kindness or more I think he would agree like, okay, so I can if the word is giving me that, I can give it that back. But I think from what he saw from the word, said like, I need to do different. So he was more like mirroring the word, I think, more than pessimistic, I think. And for Emma is interesting because I think she was someone while I was talking to Zazie was um, how present she is, how so much about the moment she was and for her it was so much about being in the moment, in the present, and asking questions but not focusing any kind of goal or anything. So I think in this way I can say like Kane is almost like projecting his desires in the future because he wants to be selected, he wants to adapt, he wants to survive. While Emma is not so much about future, is about the present. It's interesting because surviving it involves a lot about future, right? Because to survive, have to plan. To survive, have to think about I'm going to survive in like 3 years, 4 years or something. And Emma, since she doesn't have so much of strong sense of future, so much of present, it's kind of natural that she's not going to be the best survivor, I guess. So it's, yeah, it's that was kind of the main difference, I think, from both of them.
Yeah, and one thing I really love about her character is how you introduce her. Like the first thing she
Hmm.
does is she sets Will off on like on even footing. She does like the first thing she does is like,
Hmm.
why do I have to have Emma? Like,
Yeah.
and I thought it was
Yeah.
so like she didn't immediately accept the name he gave her. She questioned
Uh-huh.
him.
Yeah.
And I got the impression that was literally the very first time that anyone has ever done that with him.
Yeah.
And then she sets him off. She kind of like unbalanced him further by saying, okay, I'll just stick with Emma because I really like it. It's a really nice name.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love the fact that you like her introduction is she has a sense of agency from the very get
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Like she
Because it's
already
not, you're not gonna give Emma because you want to. I'm
yeah,
gonna give Emma because I like it.
exactly.
It's more like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And to me, I saw her well, I just love this character because I think when it comes to especially like for Black women, especially even
Mm.
we don't really get first to first get these types of roles.
Mm.
Okay. We don't normally get these types of roles for Black women, but then I think also the fact that she challenges as well. And I wanted to ask you about like the final scene is this amazing monologue and this
Mm.
recitation of a poem by
Mhm.
Will. Could you just tell me about like directing that scene one with Winston? Because I imagine it could have been extremely emotional for him to film.
Yeah, yeah, and it's amazing because people say it's a monologue, and I think it was written as a monologue, but I see read it as a dialogue, because even though
Mhm.
like Emma Sassi doesn't have the lines, it's just so much about how she respond in a way that she became part of it. I think that was the scene. Ironically, it was the scene that I directed the least. It was more like I think my main note was just build it up, like start from here and then go there, and don't touch each other
Yeah.
he's performing. So you can make part of it, and it was interesting. From that, I just step back a little bit, and I told my cinematographer to just follow
Mhm.
their movement, whatever they do. So it was interesting because Winston would start, and then from what Sazi was giving to him, he would just start doing something, responding to that, and then from what Winston would give to her, Sazi would start doing something different. So it was this amazing, game that both of them were playing and complete each other, and it was interesting because I was able to just step back, and so they were able to play the game, and my cinematographer was just follow them, and then it was sometimes I go there, but it was very minimal my interference, so it was more like about letting them do their things, and they did like great.
I think they did a fantastic job. Like, I love that you said it's a dialogue because she speaks a lot with her body and her
Yeah,
eyes, and
yeah,
he feeds, and you can tell that when she leans forward, that's when he starts to go up, and
yeah,
when she steps back, he's like, "I'm going to turn,"
yeah,
and then just like deliver my line just a bit more powerfully. So I just love that whole
yeah,
entire scene. I think, and I saw that as Will forgiving himself for
yeah,
feeling like he
mm,
wasn't enough because I think his
yeah,
big thing was that he felt like he's a failure and he
yeah,
failed Amanda and he failed himself in his previous life. So
yeah.
I saw that as like that was his moment of I felt bad, but no, I'm forgiving myself. I'm allowing myself to be in the moment because that was something I don't
Mm.
think he ever really did.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so nice. And it was, and it's interesting. Like as you talk about monologue, I think my favorite line actually, the monologue, is when they yell together.
Mm,
It's when it's just like a yell, and the song comes as like almost this third character. And initially it's interesting because when I was writing, like the song represented Amanda somehow, all those violins. So it's kind of like as almost like a conversation with three people there. And yeah, but yeah, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that scene. I really love that. Yeah.
thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
No,
I
it's
love
my
the
pleasure.
film.
Yeah.
And I love the story that you're telling with this film. And I honestly can't wait to see what you do next because I love like the way you think and the way you
Thank
get your
you.
thoughts
Thank you.
across in
Appreciate
film.
it.
So thank you so much for doing this and and I like wish you all the best.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much. Awesome. It was great talking to you, Carolyn. Yeah, I
Thanks,
appreciate
you
it.
too.
Bye bye. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.